living la vida low carb. This show is changing lives. We talking about your diet, trying to get you feeling right. Cut up them avocados, fry some eggs, time to explore the longest running health podcast, hosted by Jimmy Moore. Time to give up the crappy garbage, we're getting into ketosis. Every day is a new step to your goal, yeah, you're getting closer. Motivated and focused, don't stop, just go. Time to get inspiration from the Living La Vida Low Carb Show. Hey, the livinglowcarbshow.com.
So today, you guys, I wanted to read from an article that was written by Nina Teicholz in the New York Daily News. This was back on February 11th. The title of the news article, Vegan Fridays Are Nutritionally Risky. And so Nina Teicholz lives in New York City and has long been following a lot of nutrition guidelines. You guys know her from Nutrition Coalition. She's been trying to change the dietary guidelines for many years. I've had Nina on my podcast many times, and she definitely knows her stuff. She's the author of the New York Times bestselling book, The Big Fat Surprise, where she kind of revealed that a lot of the things we think we know about saturated fat, for example, are just not true. So she's a very provocative writer, and it's great. And in fact, in the cover here, it's kind of hard to see with this printout that I did, but this is a typical vegan meal that would be a part of this Vegan Friday. So what you have, broccoli, and then you have milk, fat-free milk. You got an apple. What is that? Maybe like a rice concoction there. And I think that's chickpeas. So that's kind of typical of the kind of meal that they're having. And Brookie Graves says, yeah, the new New York City mayor, his name is Eric Adams, by the way, is bragging about his plant-based diet. Yeah, I saw that the other day where he was like, and if I live a plant-based lifestyle, and if everybody lived a plant-based lifestyle, then we could be healthy with a plant-based lifestyle. He couldn't stop saying plant-based lifestyle. Everybody has their opinions about nutrition. All right, let's get into Nina's article, and I will give commentary along the way, and please feel free to leave your comments as well. The mayor's once-a-week vegan menu for New York City's public schools might sound like it's a healthy idea, but it could put some of our most vulnerable children on the road to poor nutrition. This is something that a lot of people don't really think about. Reversing insulin resistance says he eats fish. So that's good if he has fish. But if he's pushing a vegan Friday where there is no meat or animal-based products at all, that's not good. And Nina's right. People don't think about the ramifications of something like this, a vegan Friday promoting it. And you might be like, okay, it's one day a week. What's the big deal, Jimmy? Well, for a lot of these kids, this is like the best meal they have in their entire day, because they go home and it's a bunch of junk food, because sometimes the socioeconomics of the situation make it that the best meal they have is whatever they have at school that day. And so if they're devoid of mostly fat and protein, and especially animal foods, they're starving. And I remember watching a report from a news organization locally there in New York City, and they went to the school, especially the high school, and asked some of those like 15, 16, 17-year-old kids, hey, what do you think about the new Vegan Fridays? Are you hungry? And they're like, yeah, we're starving. One of the kids said, yeah, most of the kids were just not eating. And then right after school, we like go right to a fast food restaurant to go eat. I mean, it's horrible that they're not giving them options to choose to eat vegan or not vegan. And Nina Teicholz is right. Some of the most vulnerable people are the children having to eat this way, and it can set them up for poor nutrition. So as we talked about, the mayor, Eric Adams, his regimen of fruits and vegetables seems to keep him in good health. The dietary needs of an adult man, however, are very different from those of children, whose brains and bodies are still growing. This is an important point. It's one thing for an adult to make a conscious decision of how they choose and want to eat. It's a far another thing for those kids, number one, to be forced to do this, because I also heard if they brown bag it and they bring it from home, they're not allowed to have meat on Fridays. And so if they have to bring something from home, it's going to be vegan, vegetarian, not meat. And their bodies and brains need it. Like I remember in high school, I didn't eat the best in high school myself, but I remember those meals. After eating them, you go to the next class. That teacher knew the class after lunch was worse than useless because we were all kind of in a carb-headed fog. And I would think that educational organizations, public schools, would want their kids at their optimum, right? You would think feed them in such a way that their brain can absorb the knowledge, and that as they're continuing to grow mentally, physically, that they will be nourished. And unfortunately, that's not what's happening with these kind of movements for like a vegan Friday. In fact, it's foods such as cheese, milk, meat, fish, and eggs that are all widely recognized as important sources for the complete proteins and the essential nutrients crucial to children's health. And that's exactly right. You cannot get complete proteins unless you eat animal-based foods. Can you get all of the proteins from just plant-based foods? Yes, but it's extremely difficult. I remember talking to my friend and the author of a book called Ketotarian, Dr. Will Cole, and he advocates for a mostly plant-based diet. I remember asking him one time for keto. How do you get all the protein if you're only doing it from plant-based? Now, he, for the record, advocates fish and eggs at the very minimum with the plant-based. He said, it's very hard, Jimmy, and you would have to eat from a wide variety of foods daily, plant-based foods, in order to get all of the essential amino acids. And then at that point, it's still not even enough because it's the absorption of those amino acids as well, whereas animal-based amino acids, proteins, are very well absorbed. And you get all of them, and you don't have to worry about it. Eat some eggs, eat some fish, eat some red meat. All of those things have ample amounts of the amino acids. So let's get back to the article. Again, if you joined in late, this is an article written by Nina Teicholz, the author of The Big Fat Surprise. It's in the New York Daily News. Vegan Fridays are nutritionally risky. The American Academy of Dietetics states that, quote, well-planned vegetarian and vegan eating patterns can be healthful and appropriate for all stages of the life cycle. But well-planned usually means taking supplements or consuming foods that are fortified in vitamins. I used to think that was cool on boxes of cereal. You would see fortified with 18 essential nutrients and vitamins and minerals, and you would think that was a cool thing, never realizing, oh my gosh, this food is so devoid of nutrients, they have to spray on nutrition onto the outside of it. And let's not pretend like that sprayed on minerals and vitamins that they put on those things that they call cornflakes and frosted flakes and mini wheat thins and all the things that we used to eat for breakfast. Don't think that that is just as good as what it would be in real food form. It's not. It's far inferior. By contrast, the Swiss nutrition societies do not recommend vegan diets for children. Adding supplements to school meals is one possibility, though, yet nutrients are always far better absorbed when they are eaten in their naturally occurring form. And shouldn't we be teaching our children to eat real whole foods? Yeah, we should. I think we have become so detached from real whole foods, especially here in America, that the concept of eating whole foods is a completely foreign one, especially to kids. I know I've seen some reports where they go to kids and they say, hey, name some real food, and they'll say pizza, or they'll say French fries, or hamburgers, and they'll just go down this list of the things that they know are food, and they're not food. Candy bar, that's real food. Yeah, it's real. It's real. I can put it in my mouth. It's real. And they don't have the concept of real, meaning it's from nature. This is how it came in its natural form. They don't understand the idea of processed foods and how foods go through a very heavy manufacturing process to make them edible as they are today. It's the one thing that I have been trying in my work for almost 18 years now, is to get people back to, let's go back to eating foods in their whole form. I have backyard chickens who poop me out eggs every single day. And I have an egg I can hold in my hand that I know is a real whole food. I know where it comes from 50 feet out my back door, and I'm able to pop it into a pan, cook it in some grass-fed butter, and that is going to be a food that's going to nourish me. Now, how can we communicate that to kids that food doesn't come from a grocery store? That's another popular answer that happens. Oh, well, where does food come from? Oh, it comes from a grocery store. No, it comes from a farmer. It comes from people that raised the animals, people that grew the vegetation, whatever. And we need to stop having foods that are in a wrapper, in a box. And the sooner we can do that, then the sooner we can reconnect. And guys, those of you that have that are parents and have kids, go get you some animals. If you're able to, get you something that would connect your kids to the food. Because we wouldn't have this problem of needing to force a vegan Friday on kids if kids knew the value of the nutrition they were putting in their mouth. And I'm going to put it on the schools as well. Schools, how about serving good quality food? Maybe have a garden outside the school that's, closed in and everything so nobody from the outside can mess with it. But on the inside, the kids harvest their own vegetables and fruits and all the things. Maybe have a few chickens out there that they take care of, and then they get nutrition from that. Maybe show them the process of how you process foods for meat. How educational would that be? Jojo says, I met an adult who had no idea that beef was a cow. I was shocked, speechless. Yes. It's funny to me. It's kind of like the people too, and I've heard this, and I wasn't sure if it was a joke, but it actually was real. They said, where does chocolate milk come from? Oh, you feed cows chocolate and their milk comes out chocolate milk. They actually believed that was true. Anyway, back to Nina Teicholz's article. One vegan lunch a week may seem like it's trivial, particularly if the point is to balance out the processed foods that are consumed all the rest of the week. However, New York City school children already have what's called Meatless Monday. So on Mondays, they already aren't allowed to have meat. And now Fridays, they're being forced to have a vegan meal. So that's 2 of the 5 meals that week that they're not allowed to have any animal foods at all. While wealthier families can afford to supplement with some healthy proteins in their diet, many of the children who go to public schools in New York City rely heavily on these school lunch meals for their nutrition. Furthermore, with the mayor amplifying the vegan for all message, he very well may inspire rich and poor families alike to go vegan, when it might not be ideal for children. Look, I don't think children need to be on a diet per se. Obviously, kids are still in the developmental stages and they need to be getting the basic nutrients to help them grow. And that includes fats and proteins. That includes a wide variety of vitamins and minerals because their bodies are developing. Their bodies need those things. And when you have deficiencies in amino acids and specific nutrients, the body can't develop the way it needs to. It'll blunt growth. It'll blunt and stunt their mental growth and development. And quite frankly, we're talking about public schools. We want them to learn when they're in the schools. And what better way to help them learn than to give them the basic nutrients in their diet that will help them do that. And while a vegan diet may be helpful for an adult for a short period of time, for kids, that's a no-no. Did you go keto and thought you had to give up wine? Well, let me introduce you to Dry Farm Wines. It is the world's first sugar-free alcohol that is lower than your typical wines, organic, made at local farms that do it the right way. Most of the wines that you buy are from 3 really big companies, loaded with additives and preservatives, so many dozens of those kinds of things. You don't want all that junk in your wine. So go to dryfarmwines.com/Jimmy and they will ship you these wines. And just because you listen to this podcast, Dry Farm Wines is going to give you a bottle in your first order for just 1 cent. Go to dryfarmwines.com/Jimmy and you will get your bottle of wine for just 1 singular penny. Go check them out. Dry Farm Wines, you guys. It's wine o'clock somewhere. Let's go get some wine. I think it's child abuse to make a kid eat a vegan diet when we know from all the research that their bodies have developing brains and developing muscles and all of these aspects that need animal foods. And I get it. If you're a vegan adult and you've got kids and you want them to be a vegan, you're trying to teach them your principles, but you're not doing them any favors. Let them choose. Let them be healthy. And then when they become adults, let them choose what they want to do. But to do that when they're kids and they're still developing, you're going to stunt them, not help them. As we learned from Meatless Mondays, meat is typically replaced by starchy carbohydrates, things like pizza bagels and bean salad. These foods, unfortunately, deliver less nutrition for a lot more calories. For instance, a bagel and a cup of cooked beans gives you 25 grams of incomplete proteins, which is insufficient for building muscle. Plus, on top of that, you get 100 grams of starches and sugars, all of which become simple sugars upon digestion. That's a total of 500 calories. Compare this instead to a hamburger patty, no sugar, no starch, 20 grams of a complete protein, and it's only 204 calories. Big difference. And if you gave them 2 of those patties, they'd have just over 400 calories. They'd have 40 grams of complete protein. They would not be hyper. I would think the teachers would be all about promoting fat and protein and animal foods to their kids because they're the ones that have to put up with the behavioral issues. Think about all the behavior issues that happened in schools. How much of that is their diet? Have you ever stopped to think about that? That it's not bad kids. It's not unruly kids. It's not just because kids are going to be kids. Could it be that we're feeding them in such a way that they're acting out because the carb mind that they have from eating all those junk food carbs primarily, and then the lack of amino acids and fats is having an impact? I think that's more true than we want to believe. The high level of starches and sugar is especially concerning since those elevate your blood sugar, which is a principal driver of obesity and diabetes. A recent estimate found that 45% of children between the ages of 5 and 11 are overweight or obese. 35% under the age of 20 are diabetic. Did you hear that? Half the children, basically, between the ages of 5 and 11 are already overweight or obese. Guys, that didn't just happen. That didn't just happen. Some of it is they got some insulin resistance from their mom, who also is overweight or obese when they were in utero. So that's part of it. Some of that obviously is the foods that they're eating. And it's leading to greater obesity sooner in life. And then 35% under the age of 20 are diabetic. Guys, that's over a third. Over a third have type 2 diabetes before they're 20. Do you see the ramifications of the nutrition choices we have made? And now how it's living out in that next generation? And if they're dealing with that this early in their life, they're going to have complications a whole lot sooner than, say, my generation. I'm 50, I'm a Gen Xer. These Gen Zers, they're going to deal with the heavy ramifications of these choices that they're having now long before our generation did. Sometimes people in my generation didn't start dealing with the effects of some chronic health things like diabetes and the like until maybe their 40s. These kids, they might deal with it in their late 20s into their early 30s. Because if they're already dealing with it, over a third already have diabetes before the age of 20. That ain't good. That's not a good sign. And then listen to this, what Nina Teicholz has to say. Rates for black and brown children are even higher. This issue is one that the mayor of New York City, Eric Adams, who also had type 2 diabetes, he says he's now reversed it through a plant-based diet, he should obviously and understandably care about. Another concern about the vegan diet, though, is that while some groups will claim that things like iron are equally available from plant and animal foods, the scientific literature tells a different story. Meat, for instance, contains a form of iron that humans can absorb 3 to 10 times more readily than the iron in spinach. I think they call that heme iron, Heme, and it is. It's a much more bioavailable form of iron. And it's funny because a lot of vegans will make this point. Well, you get all the iron you need in eating spinach. You get all the protein you need in eating beans. And they never talk about that it's not the same form of those nutrients, macro or micronutrients, that you get from animal foods. Iron is not iron. Protein is not protein. They're very specific and they're different from plant-based to animal-based. Other essential nutrients either absent in plant foods or present in forms humans can absorb well include things like vitamin B12. Very, very well known in the vegan world that you'll become vitamin B12 deficient if you eat a plant-based only diet with no animal foods. Vitamin B12 is in abundance in animal foods. So if you don't eat them, you don't get vitamin B12. This is why a lot of vegans end up having to have vitamin B12 shots. I remember I went to Australia and I saw this person who goes by Durian Rider online. He's got a blog or had one. I hadn't seen him in a little while, but called 30 Bananas a Day. And I remember seeing him just by chance. I wasn't trying to meet up with him, but this guy's like, "Hey, you're a podcaster, right?" And I was like, "Oh crap." Yeah, he's like, "Hey, Durian Rider, come here." And I was like, "Uh-oh. Durian Rider." So it turns out he was getting his vitamin B12 shot at that very time. He was just coming out from getting his vitamin B12 shot. So you are deficient in that. Also vitamins A and vitamin D3, as well as calcium and omega-3 fats. All of those things are very deficient in a plant-based diet. Those omega-3s could be why the mayor is eating fish. And so Mayor Eric Adams in New York City, he does add fish to his plant-based diet, so that's where he gets his omega-3s. But it's another item too pricey for a lot of the families that have kids in these public schools. And so while he promotes a vegan Friday, you know what would make it cool? You know what would probably smooth this over for the vegan Fridays? If he gave them the fish on the same plate. So in addition to all this stuff right here on this plate, maybe even replace the chickpeas or the rice or something and put fish on that plate. I don't think many people would bat an eye at that for kids. But the problem is there's no meat at all. None. Zero. Why? If the mayor himself is eating fish in his, quote, mostly plant-based diet, then why can't the kids? How about it, Eric Adams? Can we add that to the plate? Regan Bailey is a professor of nutrition science at Purdue University. And Regan said, "This is the stuff that keeps me up at night. Going into reproductive age at nutrition risk can cause intergenerational effects," talking about the nutritional deficiencies primarily in girls. And see, girls are a very special lot in this world because they're the ones that have the babies later in life. And so you don't want to mess with their reproductive system, and yet not giving them animal foods does. It totally does. In one government-funded clinical trial, they looked at 555 school-age children in Kenya, Africa. A lack of meat was shown to affect the mental acuity of the kids. Children given a daily meat supplement over nearly 2 years, they all consistently scored better on the test of general intelligence and on abstract reasoning compared to the groups that received milk or energy supplements or no supplements at all. So another experiment that they did provided school breakfast to Kenyan children for 21 months. And they found that, quote, children given meat showed fewer periods of low activity and more leadership behaviors and initiative than those children provided entirely with just vegetable source foods, end quote. That's powerful, guys. They can't function properly unless they're eating animal foods. Why is this a hard concept to understand? And why are we putting our kids at risk? Why are we making them be the guinea pigs for this social experiment? I get it. Vegans want everybody to eat vegan. And it's okay if you want to make your case to adults, but leave the kids alone. The kids are kids. The kids need to develop. The kids can't develop well without animal foods. So why are they pushing this? What is the agenda? I know that there's a lot of move to try to eliminate animal foods from our society altogether. That's why they came up with Beyond Beef. They can't Beyond Meat, Impossible Burgers, and these kinds of things. They came up with those things because they're trying to show the public, well, if you like meat, we have meat options.
A lot of people ask me, Jimmy, how do you get such good deep sleep? Well, there's a lot of things that I do, but one of the newest things that I recently added is this upgraded magnesium from a company called Upgraded Formulas. Go to their website, upgradedformulas.com, and you can learn all about this nano technology that they use for this particular mineral of magnesium. Again, it's called Upgraded Magnesium, and it's got all the different forms of magnesium in it, using the nanotechnology so it gets absorbed a lot better. Guys, I have seen my deep sleep improve by as much as 30 to 40% simply by adding in this product along with sunshine exposure, darkness in the room, cooler temperature, all of the things that I always have done. So again, upgradedformulas.com is the website. Go check them out.
I saw one of the influencer friends of mine today on Instagram, and she was posting a picture of some organic grass-fed beef that she bought. It was like $8 a pound. And then she saw the Beyond Meat was about $10 for a pound. And she's like, why would you get this one that's loaded with like crap and canola oil and all this stuff when you can get the real McCoy and be very well nourished? Fake meat is not meat. Having a vegan Friday is not making our kids healthy. And Nina is spot on in this article. People might reasonably think that American children cannot be compared to Kenyans, yet the vigorous promotion of vegan and vegetarian diets by media influencers and nutrition authorities like the leaders of the Harvard School of Public Health has helped lead to about a quarter of Americans saying that they now eat less red meat. That's sad to me. But for the longest time, chicken has been the number one most consumed meat in America. Why? Because we've been told to fear fat, and so chicken's pretty much devoid of fat. And red meat has been so vilified for everything, heart disease, cancer, death, like all these things. So when you vilify something so much that people slow down on eating that, and then they replace it with an inferior form of the same kind of food, animal food. So chicken is an inferior form of meat compared to red meat. Red meat is far superior to chicken. A lot of people, even in the keto and carnivore community, say, chicken kind of makes me hungry. And I'm one of those people. When I have chicken, unless I'm able to get like a rotisserie chicken where I can eat from the whole animal, if I have just chicken breast, I'm starving an hour later. I just don't do well. Even though I'm getting amino acids from that and complete amino acids at that, I'm not getting enough fat. And so it's the natural fats that come in red meat. And then red meat also has all of these amazing vitamins and minerals in them that unless you're eating red meat, you're not getting those nutrients. And so that's the argument for pushing people to eat more red meat. But the problem is these surveys that show people have reduced their red meat consumption. And we wonder why their brain health is suffering. We wonder why people still deal with some chronic diseases. Now, they blame those things on people still eating red meat, but the reality is people have removed the red meat and they've replaced it either with a vegan, vegetarian, plant-based type of diet or with lower fat meats, which are not as satiating, and therefore they're getting negative effects in their health. Already in 2016, adolescent girls between the ages of 9 and 14 had low intakes of protein, iron, folate, vitamin B6, and vitamin B12, and girls and boys both have low intakes of phosphorus, magnesium, and choline, according to one government analysis. The belief that meat consumption must be reduced to save the planet is also a strong motivating factor. Look, I get it. They have propagandized people to the point that, oh no, if you eat meat, that contributes to climate change. And look at all the poor animals that have to be killed in order. Look at all the water that's used and the resources to make a beef. What they never tell you is that more animals are killed at the holy altar of veganism than of animal foods. Yes, it's true. All the pesticides and herbicides and pesticides, all these things they do in order to make plant-based foods, and then you need dead animals to help that food grow. They're not telling people the whole truth. And so you can be all virtuous and say, well, I'm just doing this for the planet, and the poor animals, and all the reasons that they come up with. And look, if you're vegan, vegetarian, and you do it for moral principles and you have a conviction about that, I'm not going to stand in your way of doing the thing that you think is best for you. The problem is when you've got the mayor of New York City promoting something called Vegan Fridays on our most vulnerable in the population. Kids in public schools in New York City are forced on Fridays to have to eat a vegan diet for lunch. And like I said earlier, I've watched some news reports. They actually had man on the street reports asking kids about what they think about the Vegan Friday lunches, and they're like, nobody's eating it. They put it on the plate and they throw it out. They don't really eat it, or they'll nibble on a little bit of it, and then after school, go and eat the junk food. Is that the answer? Can we not give them the option? And here's the bigger question. If you're a parent of one of those kids, don't you want to say in what they're, quote, allowed to eat? That's your kid. What if you're a carnivore parent and you're like, I know the value that meat provides me and my family, and I want my kid to be able to eat meat. Now, maybe that's a project for them that day that you say, okay, since they're going to force you to eat plant-based foods on Friday, kids, let's practice extended fasting. So maybe you do normally 12 hours of fasting and then they eat. How about you say, okay, eat something before you go to school at like 7 o'clock in the morning. Have a nice hearty animal-based foods breakfast, some sausage, bacon, eggs, whatever. And then fast throughout the day until the dinner meal that night. And so that could be a creative way for parents in New York City that don't want their kids to have to be exposed to this. It's just such a shame that government has to be involved in something like this. It's not their business. This is the parents' role. And we need that. And Nina's trying to point that out. Given the many other ways we could reduce carbon emissions besides reducing meat consumption, doing so by compromising the health of our children is morally dubious. It's criminal, guys. Our kids should not be the guinea pigs for this kind of experiment. Again, let adults make the choices they want to make and live with the consequences of those choices. But forcing it on kids, immoral. For the future of our kids, pass on the pizza and then keep the meat. Growing bodies and brains depend on it. So again, this is written by Nina Teicholz. She wrote a book called The Big Fat Surprise. It was a New York Times bestseller back in 2012. It's hard to believe that's 10 years old now. But the title of this article, Vegan Fridays Are Nutritionally Risky. New York Daily News is where that was published on February the 11th. So any final thoughts before I get out of here? Please feel free to fire away with what you think about this. Brookie says breakfast is such an important meal for children. It is. And, I think sometimes we forget as adults that the way we eat now is far different from the way that our kids eat and what our kids need to grow and become what they need to become as they're turning into adults. And so we see things through the prism of adulthood, and we forget children have a far different nutritional need than we do, especially in the teenage years for both boys and girls, where they're making changes radically. For the girls, they're having hormonal changes that are happening that require them to eat certain things that would make them more reproductively available. So when they become adults, they can have babies and all the things. Guys actually need more protein as well when it comes to muscle growth. You know, I think about the football teams for these New York City public schools. Are they telling those football players that they can't have meat on the day on Friday? And look, Friday is the day of the week when they have like high school football in the fall. Are they going to do meatless vegan Fridays and then expect those kids to perform on the football field on Friday night? Did they really think this through? I don't think so. And I don't think we need to be in the business of telling kids you're not allowed to have a very highly nutritious meal, which includes animal-based foods. But that's exactly what they're doing in New York City. So if you had not heard about it, New York City mayor, he's the brand new mayor of New York City, Eric Adams. He is a mostly plant-based guy. He does eat fish in his plant-based diet, but he does the plant-based lifestyle, and he has now done a decree which declares in public schools in New York City that Fridays will now be called vegan Fridays, and they're not allowed to have any meat on that plate. This is what the plate looks like. Apple, fat-free milk, rice with some vegetables, chickpeas, and broccoli. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm starving just looking at that page. And again, I think the solution, since Mayor Adams does this in his own diet, the solution is throw some fish in there. Remove one of those sides and throw some fish in there. And I think it would probably be okay. It's still not great, but it would be better than this. And this is the kind of thing that we need to speak up now, because if this takes hold in New York City, it sets the precedent for a lot of other schools and school districts. What would happen if this came to your school district? Those of you that are parents, what would you do if your school district came to you and said, all right, your kid on Mondays, we already have meatless Mondays. Now on Fridays, we're calling it vegan Fridays. What happens when they create wheat-only Wednesdays? Right? Don't think it won't happen, guys. When they started meatless Mondays, they were like, oh, it's just one day a week. You could do one day a week. It's not going to hurt them. Well, now in New York City, they've taken over 2 days now. And it's just one step away from taking over 3 days of the week. They're trying to eliminate animal foods from the diet. And the sooner that we recognize that, and the sooner that we balk back, like Nina Teicholz did in her article, and say, look, you're making a very, very risky move nutritionally, forcing this on public school kids. And so, if you didn't know about this before, you know about it now. Let's do something about it. Let's not let them take over the nutrition of kids who very clearly need animal-based foods.
Time to get inspiration from the Living La Vida Low Carb Show. Hey, the livinglowcarbshow.com. Woo!
Have you experienced the dreaded keto flu? Did you know that most of these symptoms are actually due to your body dumping excess electrolytes? This is where Element comes in. Element is a tasty electrolyte drink mix with everything you need and nothing you don't. That means lots of salt with no sugar. Element is formulated to help anyone with their electrolyte needs and is perfectly suited to folks following a keto, low-carb, or paleo diet. Element contains a science-backed electrolyte ratio, 1,000 milligrams of sodium, 200 milligrams potassium, and 60 milligrams of magnesium, with none of the junk, no sugar, no coloring, no artificial ingredients, no gluten, no fillers, no BS. Everyone needs electrolytes, especially those on low-carb diets, or if you practice intermittent or extended fasting, if you're physically active or sweat a lot. Add Element today and see how much better you feel and perform. Use the URL drinklmnt.com/Jimmy.
Tired of playing the mask game? Me too. That's why I wanted to tell you about the Unmask. This is a breathable, completely breathable. It covers, you can't even see that it's breathable, but it's breathable. Whether you're going on a plane, having to go into a store and wearing this thing, playthemaskgame.com is how you can get this mask. They come in all kinds of colors and everything. In fact, right there, you can see right through it what it is, but when you're wearing it, it does not look like it's anything different, but it's breathable, baby. Playthemaskgame.com.